Smart investors pay attention to companies on the cutting edge of science and technology. Over time, leaders in innovation can become stock market leaders as well. But as is so often the case, there's danger in putting all of one's eggs even in this basket. Dingus is Managing Director and Chief Portfolio Strategist with Fragasso Investment Advisors, a sponsor of our region's business. Welcome. Good to see you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, we heard some impressive stories earlier in the program about some of the cutting-edge research and even corporate leadership that's driven by innovation. Is that something that investors should be paying attention to?
Well, absolutely. I mean, obviously, there's changing times, and in technology and innovation plays an important role in that. What companies you might have invested in 20, 30 years ago are a lot different from what you look forward to in the future and what makes sense moving forward. And Pittsburgh has an incredible amount of technology and resources in the community, and one should be cognizant of what's in the area as well. Because
something to be said for paying attention to the companies that you know and have some understanding of?
Absolutely. We talk about the universities and the healthcare system in Pittsburgh. Technology plays an incredible role in our community and has helped Pittsburgh continue its vitalization over the years. Some of those technologies are often, what can be sound investments for people in a diversified portfolio as well.
Of course, they got to become publicly traded at some point to be of interest to investors. We got a lot of promising startups right now, and at some point they've got to make that transition.
Right. There's a difference between the public companies where they're traded on a stock exchange with additional disclosure and more financial reporting versus the private companies that are a little bit more opaque in what they can publish and what they actually put out there. So again, it goes back to the point of invest in what you know.
We learned during the dot-com bust a decade or so ago, however, that betting too heavily on technology can come back to bite you, no matter how good the innovation is.
Right, and I'll go back to that. Diversification is obviously what's important, and when you invest in a technology, you have to be aware of, do they have proven revenues? Are they growing? Is it a viable company? As opposed to what I would call in our industry, are you investing in something that might be considered a science experiment? It may not make it, and you have to be aware that some of the cutting edge technologies can change as quickly as that.
Well, it also comes down to business fundamentals. That seemed to be one of the things that got forgotten in the late 1990s.
Yeah, if you look back to the late 90s and in the dot-com era, people really got away from fundamentals. It was more of a dream or an idea as opposed to proven revenues. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying, a science experiment. You really want to look at the company that is growing and using technology to grow their revenues and grow their business, as opposed to something that just sounds good on paper.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes too if this pendulum's almost swung so far the other way. You don't hear about a whole lot of IPOs and those hot new ideas emerging on the market as much as we did a while back.
Yeah, it's kind of gone a different way too, where things have pulled back to the point of conservatism, and that's okay too. And again, we talk about technology. Some of the larger companies, even in our region, really employ technology to a great degree, and which you might not think of them as a technology company, but in their industry, they're employing some of the most creative technologies and cutting edge that's around.
Well, and can you look inside companies to look for that? I mean, I think of banks in some cases that are so driven by software technology and other types of innovations. I'm sure they have it in any company that's more about science or engineering or whatever else, but it's got to be happening in a lot of different places. Is that something you can understand and then decide to invest in?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, when you're researching a company and, at Fragasso, we look to see, are they stable, are they growing, but more importantly, are they employing research and development in a positive way? You really want to look at their research and development and see if those things are coming to fruition in the pipeline, that those revenues or those money spent on research and development are going to transpire into real sales growth.
So you can have a technology-driven strategy that's still about large cap stocks in some case, right? It's not all the little startup or the IPOs or the young, fast-growing companies.
No, it's ironically, it's kind of interesting because some of those large companies might have billions of dollars that they're spending on research and development, and they know that not all of those are going to pan out. But some of those are really going to transpire into really rapid sales growth in their industries. And again, whether it be large caps or whether it be locally or just some of the bigger companies, they have to employ technology or they're not going to grow like their competitors.
So finding that company that's driven in innovation. I hadn't thought though that they're just inherently more diversified because the bigger you are, you can take some risks. That a smaller business, you would be potentially betting the whole farm. That's
exactly true. Some of the bigger companies, that starts out with they might have $1 billion in research and development, and it might be that $5 million project that actually is the windfall for them. Whereas the other companies are, again, kind of betting the farm, but risk reward, it's leveraged in both, in the small companies and the large companies.
Well, fascinating stuff. It is the future any way you cut it. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in a minute with a little more dollars and cents. Stay with us.